Great. Thank you, Derek. So my name is Scott Smith. I think I know many of you in the room. Derek and I have been sort of brainstorming and strategizing in this area for the last couple of years, and it's really exciting to be here tonight to see all of you and to see all of you. This is something we have dreamt about for the last couple of years, and hope that it really is the beginning of some really great progress here in our area. My role is going to be the moderator for the panel discussion and the questions that you may have. I want to introduce the panelists here quickly, our invited guests, but also say that as they are making their presentations, if you have any questions, please raise your hands. They are welcome to be interrupted with your questions and have a discussion as we go through.
And I'll run a mic out to you.
Yep. So. And after the presentations, then we'll have another more formal Q&A time, and then Derek and I have a couple of things we want to finish up with in terms of focusing on what could be some follow-up actions to our discussions today. So let me first introduce Suzanne Perot. Suzanne is the manager of the Small Business Services team within Community Development at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. She's responsible for the development, implementation, and management of place-based business support activities and technical assistance activities across the state. Suzanne spent nearly 10 years working in local government and downtown economic development. And prior to joining MEDC, she served as the Vice President of Mercantile Events and Marketing, an industry leader in retail and consumer-based events headquartered in Flint. Suzanne is a certified economic development finance professional and has a Bachelor of Science degree in Public Administration from Central Michigan University. Welcome, Suzanne, and thanks for coming. Next is Kate Redmond. Kate is a project director and co-founders of Common Grounds Cooperative in Traverse City, a community-owned real estate cooperative located there. I'm also a member and investor in Common Grounds, I'm happy to say. And we'll be hearing more about that from her. She also founded Common Place, a nonprofit co-working and community hub in Traverse City, and Commonplace Law, which provides legal services to support healthy, connected, and creative organizations and communities. Kate is a community enterprise attorney with a JD degree from University of Michigan Law School. So thanks, Kate, for making the trip up here tonight. And finally, Chris Miller. Chris is the chair and one of the founding board members of the National Coalition on Community Capital, a 501c3 created in 2016. Chris has been working on economic and entrepreneur development in Adrian, Michigan for nearly 20 years in a variety of roles, including as an appointed and elected city official and as the city's economic developer for 11 years. Chris introduced and championed Michigan's nation-leading investment crowdfunding law and has worked on a number of donation and investment crowdfunding campaigns with communities and entrepreneurs. One example is that he recently completed work on a project with his wife and her business partners, creating a downtown cafe, coffee, and candy shop in a 170-year-old building in Adrian, utilizing investment crowdfunding with 45 investors. Chris recently served as the 2021 Innovation Fellow for the Michigan State University EDA Center for Regional Economic Innovation. And I want to hand over to him first, and he'll start us off. So thank you all for coming, and looking forward to your presentations.
Us too. Great to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. Derek, really appreciate about 100 emails back and forth to make sure we got it. Okay, so first of all, let me say I love Petoskey. That should get a pretty good result. I love Northwest Michigan. For those of you who don't live in Petoskey, I live out there. So, I love dogs and cats. So it's really terrific to be here. We've actually been coming up, we meaning folks that are paying a lot of attention, have been working in this community capital space to this part of the state for just about a decade now. When we first came up, and Kate was actually, I think, the first inviter of us up here, and we came up and spoke to a room about this size, and I asked a question in that space then, how many of you know what investment crowdfunding is? And in that, you don't have to raise your hands. In that first room, no one raised their hands. I think it was pretty scary. So investment crowdfunding has come a long way, especially since 2016, but certainly from 2012 when the Jobs Act was passed. And that's been instructive and informative in the movement that we have called, and we're not alone in it, but I think we're one of the few organizations that are really focused on community in this space. So how many of you have heard of WeFunder? Raise your hand if you've heard of WeFunder. Okay, not too many. All right, that's good. So WeFunder is the largest platform that is carrying investment crowdfunding projects on it in the country. You should know that since from 2016 to 2021, about $1 billion has been invested by regular folks, and about 1 million people have made that investment directly into a small business and sometimes a little bit larger business. And WeFunder has carried most of the business. They've done most of that business has been on their platform. There are actually today, I think about 70 platforms where you can go on and make a direct investment in a business or in real estate. We thought, many of us at the front end of this, we thought real estate was going to be the place where we were going to see a lot of this kind of investing. And as it's turned out, that has not been the case. It was really small businesses, but now a lot of folks are starting to pay attention to real estate. I know that's one of the critical pieces in the conversation that we're going to have with you going forward. So let's go ahead and go to the first slide. Otherwise, I'll start talking and I'll go on and on and on, and we'll never get to where we need to go. By the way, I do want to call out the new city manager who is in the room with us today. How many of you have met Shane Horn? Raise your hand if you've met him. Okay, now stand up, Shane. Everybody's going to meet Shane Horn. This is Shane Horn. Shane had the very bad fortune of inheriting the position of city administrator in Adrian, Michigan when I was working there. Unfortunately, he didn't get to make that decision. He was just stuck with me. And now, in a serendipitous moment of time, a week before I come up here to talk, he gets to start as the new city manager. But this is a good guy. Ignore any relationship with me. Judge him on his own merits. He's going to stand well. So really happy to be here with my good friend Chip. Okay. So this is how we define community capital. And the we I'm generally going to refer to tonight is the National Coalition for Community Capital, the group I represent, and those who are in that movement. And definitely Suzanne and Kate are leaders in that movement. So we call it capital sourced from a broad cross-section of the community and invested in the community. So when we talk about community capital, we're talking about money that members of the community invest in that community. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and then some definitions just so we are speaking the same language. So first of all, investment crowdfunding, and I already referred to that, but that became legal in 2012 across the country when the Jobs Act was passed. So President Obama signed it, went overwhelmingly through the Congress, left and right side. I know that's hard to imagine today, but it happened. And it also happened in a bunch of states, including Michigan. We were one of the first states that passed an intrastate exemption a year after the Jobs Act was passed. The Jobs Act essentially said you did not have to have a big pile of money in order to make a direct investment in a business in your community or really any other community in the US. And that, unbeknownst to most of us, was illegal for most of about the last 80 years. Unless it was friends that you were very close to and knew their financial well-being and whereabouts, or family, you couldn't have made a direct investment. That has changed, and it's really changed the makeup of a lot of things. It's really allowed this movement to go forward. So accredited, non-accredited investors. So in an effort to protect those of us who might not make good financial decisions, the Securities and Exchange Commission and the US Congress decided, again, decades ago, that they would divide the world in two. There would be accredited investors, and accredited investors were going to be able to make direct investments, but the threshold for being an accredited investor is very high. I will just say that in general, over the last 80 years, about 95% of the population has not been accredited investors, and somewhere between 5 and 7% of the year has been accredited investors. And so when those laws were set up, the only people who could make those direct investments were accredited investors, and it was okay for them to do it. It was not okay for the rest of it to do it. So the rest of us were called non-accredited investors. So you got the accreditation or you didn't get the accreditation. You could make a direct investment or you couldn't make a direct investment. And so that brings us down to the next one. So retail investors. So if you start reading the literature in this space right now, you're going to see retail investors referred to a lot. Right now, the Senate Banking Committee is actually working on what's called the Jobs Act 4.0. And this is about increasing the number of retail investors. Well, retail investors is a very nice way of saying non-accredited investors. So it's a euphemism that's being used today kind of broadly in the industry. Direct public offering. So we're going to talk a lot about investment crowdfunding today, but another way to raise funds from a community is through a direct public offering. This is an umbrella term of sorts. Kate will correct me whenever I make any legal mistakes today, which is bound to happen for sure. But it's another way other than investment crowdfunding. There are some advantages that you can do under that umbrella in raising funds that you can't do with investment crowdfunding. Broadly, we're going to talk about debt and equity. So if you loan money to a business that's starting up, or you loan money for a housing project, your own money that you're investing, that's a debt position. If when you give them that money, you become part owner of that in some fashion or other, including stock, then that's an equity position. So you have an ownership position. So broadly, these deals are all debt or equity or some blend of the two. And Kate's going to talk about her project, which is really kind of blended those two things together in a really interesting way. Community investment fund. This is another mechanism that was set up actually in the 1940s, in 1940, the Investment Company Act, to allow communities to pool resources together. That sounds like a really great idea, but in practice, the investment structures that were set up make it almost impossible for us to really do this well. They make it almost impossible for non-accredited or retail investors to earn real returns on their investments, significant ones, because when you bring a non-accredited investor in some of these structures, the regulatory burden goes way up. It becomes very expensive. Yes?
When we're talking about accredited, you're talking about banks and other such entities, correct?
No, that's individual investors. So accredited investors is a class of investors. It's determined by wealth, income, that kind of stuff. So I should say as well, there are people who work in the industry who are by the nature of their work also accredited investors, but it's a small portion of the population. So, okay. All right, so community investment funds, they said it turned out not to be so good. However, there is a pretty good real estate fund. And so that's one of the things that we'll talk about. And as we talk about solutions to the problems, and in particular thinking about housing in the community or commercial and housing together, or just commercial, there's a real estate fund which is quite useful, and I think we're going to be seeing more use of that as we go forward. Okay, for NC3, we decided that we wanted to be very clear when we were talking about community, and I think this has been an important thing that we've done, because in this space, the same thing happens anytime there's a chance to earn money. And what is that? People want to get rich quick. And so that movement, which I've called the venture capitalization of investment crowdfunding, is happening right now in investment crowdfunding. So people are looking to put a little bit of money in and maybe have the company get a great return or get sold to somebody else and get an early exit, is what that's called. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about community capital invested by community members in a community to accomplish something good in the community, and also to get a return on investment, and also to build wealth, but build wealth in the community. For us, community comes first. Capital serves community, not the other way around. So we developed these 4 principles, and on NC3's website, you'll find them with a little bit more narrative than which is on here right now, but I just wanted to point out those principles. So when we're talking about community capital projects, we're talking about projects that are inclusive, that are fair and equitable, that empowers and serves all the stakeholders. That goes from the earth itself that provides benefits to us, to the individuals in the community, to the people who are actually involved in whatever the particular business or enterprise is. And principle 4, it facilitates shared prosperity. So I want you to memorize this. Will be a test at the end. Just kidding. But I want you to think about it when Kate is talking about her project, because Kate took these principles and a few other really, really good things, and she wrapped them all up in one project. Kate has done, I think, the best possible project that you could do. It's an example for the entire country. And she did not pay me to say that. It's just that good. So NC3's mission is to educate, advocate, and activate community capital. The emphasis on activate is mine. And in fact, if you go to our website right now, you will find it doesn't end that way. It ends in a way that talks about promoting community capital. We've just agreed that we're going to change that because we are really about actually moving in, coming into communities and working with people in the community to get projects done. Because one of the things that we've learned is we can come in and do education. We can talk a lot about this, but it doesn't make a difference, or it doesn't make a significant difference unless we tie it together with a project. And so this is the whole purpose of the work that we're doing. Let's do an actual project in an actual community with actual human beings. Let's get something amazing done together. And that's really what we're all about. This is a really great quote. The Michigan Municipal League, which is the organization that represents all of the villages and cities in the state of Michigan, a great organization. They're right now, about a year ago, they decided they were going to change their focus from placemaking. I suspect a lot of you know about placemaking because Petoskey is one of the great places to do placemaking. So that was not a proper noun until about 10 years ago. And Michigan by itself has made it one of the most significant movements globally. But MML moved from placemaking to community wealth building as their fundamental focus about a year ago, because they recognize that we can't do great placemaking if there's no wealth in communities, and we need to have it. And so they've now focused that on, and this is a great quote, community wealth building is about developing assets in such a way that wealth stays local, helping families and communities control their own destinies and their own economic destiny. And that could not be more well stated. Next.
What is placemaking?
Beg your pardon?
What is placemaking?
Placemaking is the creation of attractive places within communities that make people want to live there. So Traverse City's done a great job, Petoskey's done a great job, whole northwest coast of Michigan has, but a lot of communities. And Suzanne, do you want to chime in and answer that question? Because you can answer it better than anybody in the room.
How was working? Yes. Okay. I think you did a pretty good job, right? So it's thinking about the public space that really makes communities special. So it could be a park, a trail, a playground, a restaurant, outdoor dining. It can be associated with commerce or not. It could be part of the park system and part of the natural environment, but it doesn't have to be. I hate to say this, it always frustrates me, but I have heard others say, you know it when you see it. And I know it when I saw it here when I drove into Petoskey and I got into the downtown, because that's a really special place. Even walking through this campus and seeing public art, that is part of placemaking too. So it's really kind of those attributes that make a place special. I think I can actually even just transition. Are we standing? Are we standing while we're talking here? Okay.
Be comfortable, whatever.
All right, well, I am just gonna start with a quick introduction. Again, I'm Suzanne Perrin with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, the MEDC. The MEDC is the state's lead economic development organization. We're responsible for marketing the state. If you're familiar with the Pure Michigan campaign, we also work on business attraction, business development and expansion, as well as community development. So creating communities and creating great public places. And that has really been a key focus of talent retention and attraction to the state of Michigan. So I have been working for the last couple of years with really small businesses, micro businesses, meaning businesses with 9 employees or less, and place-based businesses. So those mom and pop shops, independent retailers, had dinner tonight at the food truck lot. I I mean, that is like, how can we get more of that across the state? That was really something special. And so when we kind of connect this opportunity around community capital with small business, we're thinking about, hey, a lot of times these startup businesses go to the bank and they're not able to get funding. How do we redirect them to people within their community that want to see food trucks, that want to see the back lot, that want to see a coffee shop? How do we make sure that we can get them the capital that they need? Before I go, I'm getting so excited here, but I want to probably need to start at the beginning. And that's with a program that the MEDC has developed in 2014 with the Michigan Municipal League called Public Spaces Community Places. PSCP is a matching grant program that will provide up to $50,000 in matching funds to a placemaking project. I found this one from Petoskey, the Petoskey Community Trail Project. This was from 2015. Anyone remember that, participated in that, donated to that, was part of that? I think it might have gone through the Community Foundation as kind of the lead organization, but they were funded through the MEDC PSCP program. Just to know, anyone that might have some ideas of potential projects, this program is still going on. There is still funding for this program. If you want to talk about it, feel free to connect with me and we can get you some more information on that program. But what it was one of the first in the country to have something where we were able to democratize state resources. So if you wanted $50,000 from the state for your community project, you needed to go out and raise that money from the community. To date, I have to look at my notes, but they're so good. To date, the PSCP program has funded over 300 projects across the state, collectively raising about $11 million in community capital and engaged 52,000 investors. Like 52,000 investors. I just gotta touch on that. Why that is so cool. Because these are folks that are willing to put their money towards a public project. And if we can get community members to give $10, $5, $500, or $5,000, what is that going to mean to solving the next problem that your community wants to tackle? So this has been a really great program that the state has been recognized globally. We've been recognized in the New York Times, all the major publications, and this still continues today. So Public Spaces Community Places, $50,000 matching grant. We can go to the next slide. I do want to talk a little bit of the kind of the next evolution of public spaces. So, you know, obviously, early 2020, we were thinking about how can we adapt some of our programs to support small businesses that have been impacted by the pandemic. So we took the same PSCP model. We developed a temporary expansion called My Local Biz. This provided a $5,000 matching grant to small businesses impacted by the pandemic. We were able to invest a little over $500,000 from the state. 6,393 people across Michigan donated to these small businesses. We supported 113 businesses and then leveraged a little over a one-to-one match. So pretty impressive, thinking about, you know, people are giving to their businesses because they don't want to see them go out of business. They're concerned about the employees that work there. They want to see further investment. They want to see these businesses grow. They know they're shut down right now. And if we can get people, again, they're just giving money out of the kindness of their heart, they're not getting anything in return. And we have over 6,000 people ready to donate. What is it going to look like when we're able to capture that momentum and put it towards the next problem that we're trying to solve? So I think I have one more slide. Really, they brought me here just to get, you pumped up? This is really exciting stuff, right? We've done some cool stuff and we have a little bit of a ways to go. I love the college president said about the triple threat of problems that you're trying to solve. Childcare also being one of my favorites. Love to connect with you on that. But let's just talk about where crowdfunding is going and some of the different types of crowdfunding there are. Because the two programs that I've mentioned so far have been donation-based crowdfunding. Another example of that donation-based crowdfunding is a program called 100 Women Who Care. Do you have that in your community? There are different chapters, right? Like that's crowdfunding. We're going to get in a room, we're all going to write $100 check, and we're going to give our money to something that we collectively agree to. That could be buying new equipment for the fire department, that could be investing in our public parks. There's been all type, there could be banners for downtown, flower baskets for downtown, all sorts of things. That's donation-based crowdfunding. It's pretty informal. There's no special platform that they're using. It's really just people getting into a room and writing a check, and all the checks are getting written into the same organization. The next kind of evolution is going to be reward-based crowdfunding. This is where I get something in return. Maybe it's not something like that crazy, but it's something pretty cool, right? Could be a coffee mug, could be a sticker. A lot of businesses have used Kickstarter. The example that I put up here is a farm in the Flint area where they were actually, depending on the level of contribution that you made to the business, you received something in return. And being a farm, I think they did like co-op baskets, like food co-ops, sort of CSA type baskets if you donated at a certain level. They raised over $10,000. 77 people signed up for their food co-op. That's a lot of capital to get off the ground. It's especially interesting when those businesses are not able to get traditional financing and can go out to the crowd to raise that first $5,000 or $10,000 that they need to start. As we kind of move down the slide here, when I mentioned zero interest loans, so these are where you're giving your money and you're actually getting your money in return. You're not making any money off of it, but you are going to be getting it back, or you have the anticipation that you will be getting your money returned to you. Kiva is a major platform for that. Kiva operates across the globe. Typically, people are investing their money on Kiva when it relates to a certain mission. So I want to invest my money in women-owned businesses. I want to invest my money in underserved communities. I want to invest my money in certain countries. Those are the types of raises that we're seeing on Kiva. And then finally, we move into investor return. And I think I didn't spend a lot of time talking about this, but when we talk about community wealth building, we're thinking about ways that we can create more opportunities for our neighbors. How can they also get in on the ground floor and make money off of some of these investments? They might not have $5,000 to invest. They may only have $50 to invest. But as a whole, we're all making the same percentage off of the money that we're investing. So the investment return crowdfunding is when there is actually an anticipated return on the investment. Yes, there is major risk involved. The business might not work out. You could lose your money. That is something that you really have to make sure you're doing your due diligence when you go in and if you're considering some of these investments. But the business, the real estate project or the housing project is going to kind of make sure you understand the full spectrum of financials before you invest your money. And it's really going to be up to you to make the decision on whether or not you want to invest. But I really see that that's where we're going. We've seen some successful projects here in Michigan that have utilized investor return crowdfunding. I'm so excited to hand it over to Kate to talk a little bit more about the specifics of the project in Traverse City, which utilized investor return crowdfunding to raise the capital for your project. So great transition here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with all of you tonight. So what's this? In Traverse City, I expect you guys might experience some of it here too. People don't always feel like we have a voice in the development that's happening in the community or that it's designed to serve the people that live there. I have a lot more empathy for real estate developers than I did 5 years ago, but it is, it's expensive to build new buildings and they're trying to figure out how to make them pay for themselves. And building great community spaces and housing things like performing arts spaces or play spaces for kids can be really difficult to figure out how to make them work financially. But we started with the burning question with Common Grounds was, well, what if we were going to choose for our neighborhood, what would we want to see here? What would contribute to quality of life for the neighbors? What would we all choose to do? So that we ended up with this idea of a community-owned real estate cooperative. It gives people a way to directly participate in the real estate that's happening in their community and also maintain ownership in the long term. Sometimes we see development that starts out as affordable housing and then ends up turning into condos 10 years later or short-term rentals. And this gives a way to really give the community a long-term voice in what happens with that real estate. And it's also a way to fund the wonky term, if you'll bear with me, is social infrastructure. So it's very similar to placemaking. It's the spaces that we all use where we interact with other people, our public libraries, our public parks. And there's a lot of research around that communities that have good social infrastructure also have stronger networks in their community, relationships between people, and that helps contribute to the resiliency of individuals and to the community as a whole. And that it also gives us all a way to put in our money, so our financial capital, but also our networks, our ideas, our support, our time, and everyone to contribute to help have this community-owned real estate. So Common Grounds, the mission to develop real estate that meets community needs and improves quality of life for people in our region. Our building has 2 classes of ownership, so cooperatives are just businesses that are owned by their customers. So first, you guys have such a wonderful grocery co-op here in town, so you're familiar. If you're an owner of the co-op, if it makes a profit, it returns it to you, its customers, in proportion to how much you shopped there. A real estate cooperative is the same idea. We're owned by the people that use our facilities. And in that case, that means we're owned by our commercial tenants who are mostly nonprofits. I'll talk about that more in a minute. And also just our community group, class of ownership. Anyone in the community can become an owner for $50. And as we'll talk more about, we raised the equity investment that we needed for the project from those community owners using investment crowdfunding. And we ended up with a 4-story, 47,000 square foot mixed-use building with underground parking. So about a $60 million project overall. So why Common Grounds? What is it that we're hoping to contribute? Well, we looked at what our community needs were, workforce housing, early childhood care, supporting building a culture of health for our community, and supporting food, arts, wellness, and family, and organizations that work in those areas. Helping with economic development by building and contributing neighborhoods and types of spaces that help attract families and people that want to live in our community long term. And also aligning with the city's vision to redevelop the street where we were located as more of a compact, walkable downtown district, and as a healthy living corridor. So we wanted to align and contribute with that. A quick timeline. The original idea for the project began with Chris Treater from Higher Grounds Coffee. And he just identified this as a great site to do a development project. It was a vacant lot, underutilized, and in Traverse City we have so much water, but so few places where you can really enjoy the water as a member of the public. So he really had a vision of this beautiful cafe space on the river. And he started working with the developer, and they got the basic footprint of the building. And I got involved because I started a co-working space, and we got the co-working space into the building. And we, because of Chris's influence and inspiration, also had the idea of using investment crowdfunding and setting it up as a space that was owned and financed by the community. So in 2018, we were able to purchase the land. We got our core group of nonprofits and businesses together. We all sort of co-designed the building. We started the cooperative. We did our first community ownership drive. Again, just pushing those $50 ownerships for anybody who's interested. The following year, we did our first investment crowdfunding campaign and worked through some of the building design and zoning approval. In 2020, we were able to work through our financing approvals and break ground, and then the building will actually be completed this fall. So if you've driven down 8th Street recently in Traverse City, we've seen it under construction. It's very exciting. Looks a lot like that picture.
Do you have a date or is it this fall?
The residential units will be done in September and the commercial units will be done in November. So we're getting really close. Just to do a quick tour of the building, the south side is the floor plan that's closer to the floor, and that's at the river side, and then 8th Street is on the north side up top. So the first floor has an early childhood education space. That's a parent cooperative Montessori that we helped to incubate because of how challenging it was to find an early childhood partner. The greenish space is a food hall that is a nonprofit for-profit partnership with Higher Ground and a few other partners, including the Grand Traverse Food Shed Alliance, and that'll have a mission of helping to incubate chef entrepreneurs, kind of providing that space between a food truck and a restaurant. And also, of course, helping to serve local healthy food and create business models that can support local healthy food. In the middle there, where it's yellow, is a monumental stair. So one of those staircases that has big giant stairs that you can just see toddlers climbing up and down and teenagers hanging out and drinking coffee after school. Be a great community space just in that monumental stair. And you go up the monumental stair to the second floor, and you enter a shared lobby reception area. The bright green area is the Alluvion, which is currently doing a patronicity campaign. I'll do a quick plug for them if you want to check it out. And it's a performing arts space that'll seat 150 people with a stage, but it's designed to be flexible, so it also can be used for other community events. And its primary use is music, but it will also be used for theater and film, performing arts in general. The blue space is commonplace, so that's co-working and shared office space for nonprofits. This is a little bit of an older floor plan, but up there in the northeast corner, you have groundwork. I see Jen sitting back there. They'll have their home office right there. And then adjacent to that is the teaching kitchen. So that's set up to focus on culinary medicine, and groundwork will help program that, and it'll be used for other cooking classes as well. There's we also will have a great visual arts program in the building. So really wherever you see a wall in the common space, we're working on how to have visual art describe that. The third and fourth floor are the residential units. Will be income-based, with a quarter serving people earning 60% of area median income, a quarter serving people earning 80% of area median income, a quarter at average area median income, and then a quarter just as market rate units. We'll also have a couple of short-term use units that will serve when artists come and perform in the building. They'll have a place to stay, and also we'll rent them out to our community owners so that they'll be able to use and stay in the building as well. And we really are hoping that this housing will be affordable for people that work downtown Traverse City. We really believe that people who work in a community should be able to afford to live there. And that was who we designed these places for. And we did a lot of focus and groups and feedback with people working downtown to try to get to design the units and see what they would want. So there's a lot of these small studio units that are just 400 square feet, and then also some 1 and 2 bedroom units. So overall project costs, we bought the land for a smooth $1 million. The direct hard costs, so those are construction costs, plus a bunch of other costs associated with construction. And then our soft costs, a lot of that is construction loan interest. It's just a huge expense, as well as architectural and engineering fees. And the other sort of soft costs of communications and marketing and staffing that we've had in the first few years of getting the building going. So where did we get all that money? A big piece of it was the community investment equity. So for real estate, just like if you're buying a home and you need to put 20% down, same with commercial real estate, you have to be able to put some amount of equity into the project. And we went to the community and said, okay, will you help us? Can we all take a little bit of risk together to make this project possible? And we got there. We had tremendous support from the community. We really didn't know what to expect since investment crowdfunding is a relatively new concept. But we had we did another campaign last year, but in our first campaign, we had 132 investors with a median investment of $2,000. So it really hit that, that nobody was taking so much risk that if they lost all their money, they would be in huge trouble, but we were all taking a little risk together to make it possible. We also had support from the MEDC, thank you, in the form of a $1.5 million grant, and that was really targeted to help us support the workforce housing on the project. We had a little bit of brownfield grant money. Our commercial tenants or investors on their behalf also put down payments on their spaces. And we used a form of financing called PACE, which is targeted, comes on your property as a special assessment, so like a property tax, and it is targeted towards supporting your green infrastructure, so what you're doing is about code in terms of for energy efficiency. And then we ended up with 2 loans. Our primary loan had a USDA loan guarantee, which the project really would not have been possible without that. Typically, when you're doing big real estate projects, they're hard to do if you don't already have a bunch of resources because the bank wants somebody to be able to guarantee that that money will be there. And no one on our project had $8 million that they could guarantee to be able to pay. The project fell through, but the USDA has a loan guarantee program, so the federal government is guaranteeing. Yeah, well.
Could you explain a little more about the PACE assessment financing?
Sure, it has to be enabled by both state and county level legislation, and you actually get a loan from a third party, but you pay it back as a tax on your property. So if you ever sold the property, whoever bought the property would have to continue paying that tax, just like a special assessment.
In this case, who's paying that?
We are paying back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's a 25-year term. It looks and feels a lot like a loan. That when they built the PACE program, the intent of the people who created the idea was that it could be treated almost like equity, or it wouldn't show up as that on your books because it's property tax. But I couldn't convince any of our lenders. It wasn't that.
25 years and it's done.
Yeah, but it works just like a loan. We make monthly. Well, it's not. It works just like property. You pay twice a year. Yeah. So we had our primary loan, and then we also ended up with a secondary loan from IFF, who is a community development financial institution, a CDFI, which is basically just a 501(c)(3) bank that does mission funding. And they are, yeah, go ahead.
Had you set a goal for your community investment equity? And if so, how does the total relate to your goal?
We, at the time that we did it, we said, well, we'll see how much we can get. And we, if we could have raised $16 million that way, sure, that would have been great. We would have been glad to have our debtors just be our community. We really did exceed our expectations, though. We were really hoping to get to more around 500,000, and that would make the rest of it work. But that would, partly we just wanted to know that the community supported the project and it resonated what we were doing. It resonated with people. So it did really surpass our expectations. And it was, I know I should say that we had a really firm goal, but honestly, it was such a new concept that it was just very hard for us to know what would be realistic to go to the community, but expect. Yeah, next slide. So talking a little bit more about housing, because I know that is an interest with this group and a need in this community as well. So, we really ended up making it possible with government, community, and business coming together. So the government support, that MEDC grant funding was really crucial. I talked about the USDA loan guarantee that really made the whole project possible, and a little bit of grant money. So, from our local brokerage. So all of that does helps in terms of government support. Next slide. The community investment was such a huge piece of it. So we wanted to give the community a way to build wealth by investing locally. So we didn't want to say, well, we'll just pay you 1% or 0%. We wanted to pay something that would be a meaningful return. On the other hand, if we were to pay a 20% return, the project couldn't afford it and be able to offer performing arts space and early childhood care. It would be too expensive for our tenants. Go ahead.
So, has there been any county government investment in this? in light of the fact that recently the county has been getting American Rescue Plan Act millions of dollars to use for maybe this sort of thing
And they haven't dispersed those funds yet.
in your county?
Yeah, and in Grand Traverse County, we have not yet. And we had the brownfield money that we received was through the county brownfield authority. So that the county did support it a little bit that way. But yeah, through the brownfield money that we have local support. So the way that as Chris said, we have a little bit of an equity loan hybrid. So technically, in order to invest in our project, you had to be a community owner. So it's equity because it's our owners putting money into the project. But we made it feel more like a loan. We did a lot of talking to people trying to understand that, if you would want to do this, what would make you feel comfortable? And it just felt a lot simpler to structure it as a loan. So we'll pay people back the amount that they put into it, but they'll earn a 7% interest basically for as long as they leave their money in. It's a preferred return, which is something that you give in equity. So in theory, if there's a year where we can't afford to pay it, we wouldn't be legally obligated to, but we structured it so that it will be added to your initial investment and we'll pay a return on that in future years as well. And that is what the bank requires in order to treat it as equity. If it were a guaranteed return, then they wouldn't be able to use it as equity. Well, this slide that we now have over 800 community cooperative owners, and we're going to target about 1,500 by the end of the year when the building actually opens. And we anticipate offering the ability to invest on an ongoing basis so that it's just always the opportunity that people can build wealth. This is a way if you want to build wealth and invest in the community, you have the avenues to invest in the ground. The other piece I think that's worth noting is that really those commercial tenant owners are subsidizing residential. So even with the MEDC grant and the other support we got, the workforce housing just does not pay for itself. It's really expensive to build right now. And we're charging below market rents, although honestly, even if we charge market rents, it wouldn't pay for itself. When I say I'm more empathetic to real estate developers, this is a big part of it. Because sometimes you get the narrative that, people aren't building affordable housing because they're greedy. But the reality is you can't afford, you just can't afford to have it pay for itself without some sort of subsidy or support. And we are developing other revenue sources within the building long term, community membership plans, renting out common spaces to help fill that gap as well. But just to note, so the debt service coverage ratio is what lenders look at, and that just means if you have a 1.0 debt service coverage ratio, that means you make exactly enough profit to pay your debt at the end of the year. And so if you're over 1, that means you have a little bit of money beyond what you need to pay out your bills and your debt. And 1.38 is a pretty low. Normally, lenders are really happy if you're over 2, but of course, us as a community service project and nonprofit, we're not trying to make a big profit. But you can see our commercial is paying 1.84, so they're making money on top of paying their loan, whereas the residential is below 1, so they are losing money unless we have ways of resisting them. So I started to spend a little time on that, but I do think it's good just to know that it's probably not realistic to expect, particularly workforce housing to pay for itself.
So what I'm hearing is if it was just residential and common grounds, it wouldn't be feasible.
Yeah, I mean, unless we added another
Let's do one more.
short-term rentals, right? Or
you had some other subsidy from government or business or other.
Or more market, fewer.
Or lower costs.
Yeah.
Which is possible.
Yes, yeah, it's true. There are a lot of factors, and we are building. We made an investment in a really nice building for the community long term. It's steel and brick, and it'll be there 100 years from now. And knock on wood, probably something really unusual. And they're nice units. They have good insulation between them. They'll be good places for people to live. So in other words, we made it work all together. So that's kind of the motto of Common Grounds. And such a community effort with so many people, just like all of you, starting with people just like this, who were willing to come to meetings at the time and really raise their hands. So I over time. But I'll tell really quickly the story of one of our initial investors that helped us buy the land. I know some of you may know Bob Atwell, who's really involved in starting Tart, really great community member, and he was an environmental engineer for a long time by training. And he and his wife invested, and I met with him a couple times to talk through the project, and he looked at me and he was like, hey, is your plan just to get so many people to invest that the project can't fail because there's too many people that have something at stake? And I was like, yes, exactly. And he kind of sighed and he was like, okay, well, why don't you send me your environmental reports and I'll look over them tomorrow and let you know if I have any comments. And that's exactly how Common Grounds is possible, by so many people putting in money, but also their expertise and their time and just their care.
Getting property tax abatements for a period of time?
We're not, and now I wish I had pursued that more aggressively at the beginning, but the city has become a lot more open to that in development than they were when we started the city.
What about utilities giving a break on connections or city on connections to city sewer system?
No, not really.
Has the cost for, not necessarily per square footage, but just from a affordability perspective on the residential units, do you have that cost yet?
And what the cost of construction is?
Rent.
Oh, the rent. We'll start, so the cheapest unit in the building will be $600 a month, and the most expensive will be $2,500. So that goes all the way from, we have a couple of units that are, they're not full studio apartments. People are renting bedrooms with attached bathrooms, and they have a shared kitchen living room area, so kind of like a co-op and a co-op, and those bedrooms will start at $600 a month, and then the market rate 2-bedroom is $2,500.
Was Habitat for Humanity an investment or a partner?
No, I mean, they're, we support what they're doing and they support what we're doing, but they weren't actually involved.
The cost for affordable housing, is that going to go up as local incomes go up? Or is that once they start paying the rent, does that increase over the years or stay that way?
Yeah, I'll say, usually the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, MISHDA, is the main source of state subsidy, and they have a bunch of rules around what you have to do if you keep their money. And we did not take any MISHDA funds, so we don't technically have to follow their rules and how they calculate it. But we are, for now, starting out just because it's a system that exists and it's understood, by using how they calculate income levels. And we will gradually, if somebody starts out with at the 60% of their median income and with their 5 years, and they do really well for themselves, and they're now in the market, we'll gradually increase their rent, and then, the next federal apartments available rent back to somebody at 60% of their median income, so that we'll maintain the proportion of units, so we can close.
So they get any equity in their apartment, or when they do this?
Right, these are all rental units. We definitely could talk about, first housing cooperatives are another, I think, a really great way of letting people build some equity in the space that they have. But we couldn't have afforded to do that and have affordable housing. Just financially, it just would not have been feasible to do both. So we looked at what the community need was, and at the time, the housing needs assessment showed that the highest community need was affordable housing, and rental units were considered a bigger need than like purchase units or rental purchase. So we went for rental instead of equity.
So according to grant drivers, and I'm sorry, I don't know that county as well as our county here, but the $2,500 rental cost for that top end unit, is that considered under work affordable housing?
No, those are market rates. So
Those are market rates.
A quarter of our units are just market rate.
Okay,
Which
and
of
then,
course in Traverse City is it's a very high number.
yeah, so from the $600 unit, which is more of that cooperative living environment, right? Shared bathroom, shared bathroom and shared kitchen, but
They have their own bathroom, but then a shared
own
kitchen.
bathroom, shared kitchen. Okay. So what is the gap between this $600 to what has Grand Traverse County, or have you defined this project defined as the affordable housing? What's that top dollar? So $600 is the lowest, and the top dollar is what?
Even if not in the market rate units, but I would have to look at my spreadsheet to tell you that number for sure. It's so we're using the state housing authority numbers for Grand Traverse County.
Okay.
And I forget what, so I mean, the highest would be whatever a 2-bedroom is for people earning average median income, because that's our highest price affordable housing is serving people earning median area income. And yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know.
That's okay. And then my last question is how many humans per unit? So that $600 unit, just the most affordable, so to speak, is that for one human? Is that an adult and one kiddo? What does that look like from an actual body perspective?
Sure. I mean, we count bedrooms, not humans, and so
Okay.
it's, so I mean, most likely 2 in a 1-bedroom, right? Would be the max, and more likely to have 1 person there. And then for our 2-bedroom units, probably 4 people. Thank you. Any other? I don't know if I should keep answering questions or.
Just wondering what the parking situation looks like, and also, do you follow you guys get a PUD or something like that, or is it just?
Parking is the most popular question we get locally. We do have, so we have a level of underground parking, so we'll have 19 spots that are all public parking, so our DDA will be metered, and just like other public parking in Traverse City, the DDA will enforce it. That is not enough parking to serve the projected demand for the building, but we, we're aligning with the city's vision of having this be a walkable downtown corridor, which means eventually when there's enough demand for parking in the area, then, the community will look at a parking ramp or some other way to solve parking as a community, that you can't build walkable, compact downtown districts if everybody builds enough parking on site, right? Our building would be less than half its size. So people are kind of taking the leap of faith. And we're 3 tenths of a mile from 2 different parking ramps. So it's not still a reasonable distance, and people can get long-term permits there if they want to. And we're kitty corner from the governmental center, who has public parking accounts, which will also help with our highest demand period. So there's my full parking area. Hold on, I've got part 2 for this question too. We are within the zoning limits, but because of the number of trips to our building, we did have to go through approval by the planning commission, not a review or anything, just a review and approval. So this wasn't too bad.
What about the residential parking?
No, so they have no dedicated parking. They can get a spot in the parking ramp for the students.
So Grand Traverse County has a significant transit system, very functional, right? So that could
Yes, and
maybe reduce the need for parking a little bit.
we actually have a bus staff directly in front of the building. Yes, yeah, we'll incentivize and encourage, of course, we have a ton of bike parking, alternative transportation, and encouraging people, especially people that are working in the building, to walk, bike, or bus to work. And when we were doing the focus groups with downtown employees, of course, this might be different when people actually go to give up their keys, but we got a lot of feedback that people were driving in from Buckley and they were paying gas costs and the vehicles were unreliable, and that they loved the idea of picking up their car if they could afford to live, that they could walk bike or bus to work instead of having to drive.
So I think you should give Kate like an incredibly big round of applause. And then when I said it's a demonstration project that could be carried across the country. And I think the innovation that Kate showed, and this is really, she'll talk about other people, but Kate led this project from the get-go pretty much. And I think seeing the creative things that she did, while they may not address some challenges that you guys have that you're looking to tackle, nonetheless, you can take a piece of that and learn it, and we could put a model together to make something work here. I think the really fantastic news, especially on housing right now, Housing North being one of the leaders in that space, there's a lot of really smart people looking at the situation who recognize that we have to solve this. There are a lot of businesses that are now willing to step up and invest in housing. You remember the company store and the company house and all that kind of stuff. So we're seeing some of that come back in. We're seeing creative use of government funds. Land banks are huge. We can do some really interesting stuff in that. Modular construction. And then community capital is a piece of that as well, because when you're bringing, I'm sure Kate's had this, we've had in our projects, when we started paying the investors back the payment for my wife's project in downtown, a couple of them said, "What's this is your repayment for the money that you lent to us." And they said, "We didn't think we were going to get any money back. We just liked the project, you know." And I had a couple that said, "No, I don't want it." And I said, "Well, we are financially obligated to give it to you. We're going to give it to you. If you want to invest it somewhere else or donate it, go for it." But that community piece, and again, that's what we're all about. We're talking about community. This is a tool to help us build community. But I think the exciting thing is, just like the community was so receptive to Kate's project, that they put their money where their mouth was. And that happened for folks all across. I'm also an investor, and I only go to Traverse City once a year. So anyway, great project. So one of the things that we did, I referenced earlier that we were interested in doing projects. Again, the we is NC3 now. And so one of the things that we have working in Michigan, first in the nation, is a community capital pilot accelerator project. And so that's what we want to kind of present to you in some fashion. I should say that Kate is part of the team that would be doing this. And essentially, we would come to you and we would work on a project that you wanted to do. And we would bring experts in a variety of areas that could help make that happen. And so if we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is kind of the process, what happens. So the commitment says, the community says, we want to make a commitment to do a community capital project. So we want to do a project that the community is part of the funding for, part of the equity, part of the ownership, like Kate did in her project. Then they agree to those 4 community capital principles, because for us, those principles are the reason we're doing this. Then our team comes in and we meet with the community, much like we're doing today, but we would ask harder questions. And we want to find out, what are the assets in the community? What can you bring to the table? What can other folks in the community bring to the table? Because again, thinking of what Kate did, it took a lot of pieces of the puzzle to make it work. And when we're looking at housing in particular right now, we have to find a lot of pieces of the puzzle. We have to find assets in a lot of places. We have to find ways to do less expensive things in order to make that work. So that's what we will look at. We'll look at the specific project, whether this is real estate or something else. And we'll look at what you need from a legal perspective. And because we've been in this space for a decade, there aren't tons of folks that know how to do this, but we are well connected with them across the country. We'll bring them in, whatever technical assistance that you might need. We'll do a financial review as well with it. Our goal is to make this successful. So we want to make sure that the people that we bring in are looking at it in that way. Can this work? We want to make sure that it does. And then is there training needed? So we're working right now in Jackson, Michigan. I met with, they created a corridor improvement authority. I met with the authority a couple times this last month. And one of the things they said that they would like to have, they would like us to give training on how people make investment decisions. So most of us have not ever made an investment decision. We didn't decide we're going to invest in a company in our community because mostly it's been illegal for most of us. So one of the modules we have, we can come in and train people in your community that want to learn, how do I make an investment? What should I look at? What numbers are important? What about my finances? And we'll tell you all that stuff. Then the next thing I'm really happy that we're going to be able to do. So we partnered with the University of Michigan, Michigan State University, and we're going to come in and do a baseline of where the community is before the project is built. And then we're going to come back every year for the next 5 years, and we're going to measure again those things. Because what we believe in this space, we've seen it anecdotally, we've seen early data to support it. And that is the idea, if the project is supported and funded by the community, it's going to bring a benefit to the community. So we're measuring those things when we come in and look at, we take a baseline and we'll come back for 5 years and see what was the impact. And we'll tell you what that data says as we go forward. We will then walk through the capital raise. So when they're actually fundraising, we'll go through that with the community. And then we'll come back at the end and talk about that. And as I said, that 5-year return to the community to see exactly what's happened. That's all. Okay, so when I'm not working on community capital stuff, this is the guy I work for. And he's smiling because I'm such a great employee. So his name is Rick Hedrick, and he and his company make that telescope that's behind him. Plane Wave Instruments is the global leader in high-tech research. And I have his slide up here because then I can get a tax deduction from this meeting. No, I'm just kidding. So I have that slide up there because what was really intriguing, this company moved from Southern California to Adrian, Michigan 3 years ago. Shane Horn was actually involved in that as well. He gets a bunch of credit for that too. So make sure that you hold him to that same standard. He has to bring something spectacular into Petoskey here. So anyway, one of the things that was most impressive, and excluding the fact that they were leading the world in this telescope manufacturing and design work, was they were like excited and committed to community. Literally before they made the decision to move from California to Adrian, they were shopping for investment properties in our historic downtown. And today, 3 years after they arrived, they own 3 properties. We're closing on a 4th one and negotiating a 5th one right now. So they are believers, and they're also believers in this community capital movement. So one of the projects we're working on right now is a restaurant project, and we are going to do a community capital raise together with the investment this company is making. One of the things I want you to do is go to companies that you know and say, hey, look what you could do if you do this. We're going to do a capital raise this year where if we wanted to, we could go to the bank. And believe me, the bankers are dying to have us go. They stop by every couple of weeks, leave little treats, say, here's our current rates, just let us know, we'll write it up and you can have the money tomorrow kind of thing. What they're going to do instead of say, no, thank banks, we're going to go to the community. We're going to tell the community we were going to give the bank a 6% return when we buy this equipment, but we would rather give it to the community. So we're going to do that. So that's a really important precedent that we want to establish. And I want to make sure that Rick got credit for that. And then next slide. So this is the last thing I'm going to talk about, just blabbing about, but we'll be glad to talk more as we go forward. But so one of the things that we found in this space is that because it's new, we need to find ways to encourage people to do it. Now that's not you guys, you're all smart enough to be here. So you're kind of leading the movement. But a lot of folks really won't take the time to come in and have a conversation or hear about it. And so we're going to incentivize them. And so one of the really great models is in Nova Scotia, where about 2 decades ago, they set up a community investment fund. And if you put money in that community investment fund, they gave you a provincial tax credit. And I will tell you some really fantastic numbers. In 2019, we actually had some scholarly research on this. They invested $2 million. Residents of Nova Scotia invested $2 million. It funded about 1,200 different businesses and created a bunch of jobs. And it generated an additional $25 million in taxes for the province. So pretty interesting model. In any event, we took that model and we created it for a US market. And we currently have a bill right now in the Michigan House and Senate. It is in the Tax Policy Committee in the House right now, and it's House Bill 4116. And I want you to reach out to all your legislators and tell them to vote for it. So this legislation will, for the first in the nation, give every Michigan resident a 50% tax credit for equal to half what they've invested in a Michigan business. And it's the first in the nation. We're excited about it. The Michigan Municipal League has supported it. The NEDC has supported it. The Michigan Manufacturers Association has supported it. The Michigan Chamber of Commerce has supported it. So we have some really good support, and we think it's going to go through. We want it to go through overwhelmingly.
Which committee is that in?
Pardon?
Which committee is that in?
Tax policy.
Tax policy, is the Senate the same?
4116, and it's the substitute. So encourage them to do it. We want to try and get this done because we would love to do a project and do a community capital raise next year and give everybody that invests in it a 50% state of Michigan tax credit, which incidentally has a carry forward feature. So if you don't have a liability that size, you can actually carry forward for 10 years. So it's really a really high value tax credit. And we're excited about it. And we want Michigan to cross the finish line first on this. I have other states that are calling and saying, hey, we'd like to do one of those. And I said, you have to wait until Michigan's done, and then we'll come down to you. So, all right. So thanks very much. We'll be glad to hang around and talk and answer any questions. I'll turn it over to you. Thank you, Derek, very much.